Welcome to the podcast of That Indian Expat, where we talk about different experiences of people living all around the world. Hey everyone. So today we have a podcast about living in Seattle versus living in San Jose as a software engineer. And I have a wonderful guest here today with me.
Hey guys, I'm Adi. I'm originally from Mumbai, and I've been in the States for about 8 years now. I have been now living in Seattle for about 4 years. So yeah, I'm excited to be here, talk about my experience living in Seattle, and talk to Raj a little bit more about how it compares to being in San Jose.
All right, fantastic. So you said you moved to Seattle 4 years ago. I'm assuming that was because you got a role there as a software engineer.
Yes. I moved to Seattle because I started working at Microsoft for 4 years, and I moved
So
there.
so you actually also did your internship in
Oh yeah,
Seattle.
yeah. Actually, I was before I moved to Seattle. I was there for a short summer, and honestly, that was a big factor in me moving to Seattle. So there's this saying in Seattle, like especially among interns, that the reason all the tech companies have their internships in Seattle is because they want to attract us with the really good weather, but it's only in summer. Those that good weather lasts only for internship season, because come August, things start more like September. Things again start getting gloomy. So it's a common saying that.
I think that's a very good point because I live in the Bay and the Bay is always nice. The weather's always sunny. You really don't get to experience that much rain at all throughout
Yeah.
the year.
Summer in Seattle is beautiful. I often say that between July and end of August, Seattle is the best place to be on the planet.
How about cold? So I know the Bay, especially San Jose, usually stays between 50 and 70 degrees for the most part of the year.
Mhm.
So it's not too cold. Sometimes at night you do need a light jacket, but that usually does the job.
Seattle does get cold, at least for me. It does not snow. Not it usually does not snow. The temperature does fall down to 30s in peak winter, but it never gets quite cold for it to be like 0 degrees or something.
Yeah, coming from Mumbai, do you think that's why you get more cold?
Potentially, yeah. Like I do complain a lot more about the cold than most of the people around me.
What about rain? Do you think it rains as much as Mumbai?
The rain is different in Seattle. It's a continuous drizzle. Like it will rain a little. It's more consistent.
Got it. So, talking about weather, do you guys have some good food that balances out the gloominess of the weather?
Food. So food's a little more expensive, I think, in Seattle. Um, but there are a few restaurants that I really like. There are a lot of good like ramen places, Korean places.
Hmm. No, so San Jose, especially the Bay, is pretty popular for its food, I would say.
Yeah.
As the more south you are, you get really good Mexican food in San Jose. As you start going up north towards Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Santa Clara, you get great Indian food. I would say it compares very well with
Yeah.
India. And then, of course, as you go further north in San Francisco, there's a huge Japantown. I also noticed that if you go further out of Seattle towards Bellevue and Issaquah, I think the food is good over there.
Once you start getting out of the main Seattle area, I think there are a lot of good like Indian food options. Mexican food, I would say you can't really compare to California, but there are a few options that are good. One like drawback is to go to those places you would need a car.
Oh, you would?
Yeah,
What about Seattle in general? Do you think you need a car in Seattle?
main city of Seattle, the public transport is decent. You could get around quite easily if you're used to it. Seattle, like there is the link, the light rail, which goes from city of Seattle all the way down to the airport, up to University of Washington and stuff. There is there are buses that you can use to go to the greater Seattle area.
So Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, they all usually have their buses that comes that usually cover the entire Bay Area. So if you're in the South Bay, not as much as it's not in San Francisco, but in South Bay you're pretty much covered through that. There's also Caltrain that goes through the Bay from San Jose to San Francisco and has stops in every major city. Based on that, how is Seattle?
Yeah, so especially if you're working in one of the big tech companies, they do provide shuttle options. Similarly, there are other buses that are pretty quick on these like well-traveled routes. So I personally don't mind taking either of the buses.
So moving from there to something we were talking about earlier was culture of a city. We talked about how a city sometimes has a feel to it.
Yeah.
I especially miss that in San Jose. San Francisco, on the other hand, has a lot more to do than San Jose.
I would say I've heard a lot about Seattle being two cities in a way, with a very heavy tech culture, but also a city with its own culture. My personal experience has been more towards the tech part of the city. But that being said, that there are a lot of nice breweries. There's a lot of board game culture in the city. Good number of people that really like to hike, that love to paddleboard, that love doing all these outdoorsy things. And I think that comes a lot with the city itself, because the city very, very close to a lot of outdoor experiences.
It's a great point, because even San Jose and San Francisco area is very popular for its outdoorsy culture. We have lots of good hikes around here that are less than a few hours away, and the weather's always nice, so you can go do that in December or in August. So you brought up a good point about doing that things with friends. How do you make friends in Seattle?
I got pretty lucky with making friends. Like I moved in initially with some I just subleased apartment and I had roommates, and I became friends with their friends. Same like after the first place I stayed in, the second apartment I moved to, my roommate became a nice good friend of mine, and we could grow together in a way.
So usually you started with roommates. That's
roommates and friends of friends, and so on. I also had friends from my internship that I did at Amazon. I remember early on, like when I moved to the city, went to a few meetups, and I met quite a few people who were interested in hanging out because they were also new to the city.
So how about most of your friends? How did they make friends?
I would say like in my friend circle, again, it was the same, where we met friends of friends, and so on. I know some people just go to like board game hangouts where they meet people. People have been going to soccer leagues.
And I'll try to compare those similar things with San Jose. So number one, how I made friends, it was initially I made a lot of good friends at work, but I think that is very rare. Later, what happened was COVID hit, so I was mostly hanging out with like few good friends and my roommate that I had. But most of the people I know, they made friends through either trying to room with somebody, which was weird because they actually did not end up rooming with them. They just became good friends with them, and then they introduced them to new people. So I think that's a great way as well. Yeah. So
that's a very good point, by the way.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try that next time I move to a new city. So moving on, we can talk about the dating life in general, how it is, how the scene is. I can start with the San Jose dating experience that most of my friends share with me, is that because it's overwhelmingly tech, so it's a little harder to date. Also, people that move here usually have families. And that's why they move to San Jose, since it's cheaper than San Francisco. Dating apps are the norm here. You can try Tinder, Hinge.
Yeah.
What about you, Adi? Anything different?
Yeah, so living in the city of Seattle, the main area there is, I think the population is a little younger. I personally think it's easier to socialize, meet people in the city of Seattle, particularly about dating life. This comes back a little bit to the tale of two cities in Seattle, where when you're in the tech environment and that when most of your friend circle is tech, parties you go to, the events you go to are mostly in that bubble. Like the ratios are more male heavy. There are a good number of people that find it tough to meet women. I think dating apps are huge in Seattle, and I think they do work. Like,
So, what about the bar scene? Like, especially San Jose, we have like maybe 5 or 10 bars that are in downtown. San Francisco obviously has a ton more. As you go north in the Bay, the number of bars significantly increase, and the ratio gets better. So, how would you compare bars in Seattle to other suburban cities if you've been to like Bellevue or Redmond?
bars in Seattle are more happening. I can't speak much of the ratio. I've not been to many bars outside of the Seattle area. But yeah, like they do seem to be more happening in the city. But the ratios are off.
Yeah. What my experience has been is that Seattle is very similar to San Francisco in terms of the ratio, and I've also found them to be more friendlier. I don't know, maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree or disagree because I have not been to San Francisco enough.
Yeah,
But
we need to fix that.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, people generally are friendly in Seattle, I
Yeah,
would say.
for sure. In general, they're more friendlier. Also, I would recommend one thing: if someone wants to live in the Bay and they're not sure where to live, I would recommend, if you don't care as much about your social life, or if you're not looking especially to meet more people, South Bay is great. Just stay a little bit north of San Jose and you're set. As you go more north, your social life is definitely going to be better. Let's wrap this up. What would we tell a new software engineer moving to either the Bay or Seattle? I would probably say that when you're moving to the Bay, expect really nice weather. Expect to get a lot of different kinds of food. It's a little harder to make new friends out of the get-go, but I have seen people who are able to make friends pretty easily. Definitely try out the bars. Maybe your experiences it could be different than mine. um, Try exploring San Francisco first, because once you move to South Bay, it gets very hard to move out north to San Francisco. Don't worry about getting a car if you're in a big tech company. Shuttles are everywhere. Also, if you have a car, you can't move to San Francisco because the rent is gonna be insanely high for parking. Yeah, that's my recommendations. What about you, Adi?
Seattle, I would definitely recommend moving to places like Capitol Hill or downtown Seattle initially. Maybe you could go a little bit north, like Westlake, Eastlake, if you're concerned about the safety. I would not recommend getting a car from the get-go. I do think Seattle transportation is sufficient. Maybe not great, but sufficient. As for just general lifestyle, I would say just like moving anywhere, be friendly, talk to everyone, immerse in the culture.
Perfect, Adi. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Thank you so much, dude. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, that's it, guys.